This chapter we're going to focus in on globalization. But we're going to do this by looking at the entire history of human beings walking around on Earth's surface. So what's going on is in the last 100 years, we've had a major change. And that change, we're going to call it globalization. But first, let's put that in perspective. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old. How long have humans been on this Earth? About 250,000 years. To put that in perspective, kind of a scale, essentially what you do is you just put your arms from side to side and then go to one hand, one finger, and just get a nail file and file off just the end of a fingernail. The dust, the nail clippings that fall to the ground is essentially how long humans have been on Earth compared to the whole history of Earth's time being from one outstretched hand to the other. We're going to look at some specific, what they call revolutions throughout human history that completely changed the game. And so that's key to defining revolution, is that there's a change that occurs. But in case of the revolutions that we're going to look at, these changes take a good amount of time. These aren't overnight changes. And so revolution, when we try to define it, is a change, but typically it's a process, a slow process of change. For example, there's a song of the Beatles, "Going to Start a Revolution." It's one of the lyrics from one of their songs. Start a revolution. The idea that this isn't going to be something that overnight's going to happen. We're going to start this change. So to put it in context of the discussion we're going to look at in this chapter, revolutions, we're going to look at these big major changes that took a long time to occur. More recently, though, we're seeing shifts. So the second half of this chapter, when I focus in on globalization, we're going to look at shifts. And why I'm using the word shift is these are quick changes. The stuff that's happening today, the changes that are happening today, much faster. The scale much quicker than throughout the entire history and all of these revolutions that we're going to talk about. So this chapter is definitely going to overlap with historical geography. So this is something that's very much where we look at where things have occurred. Why here? Whose story's being told? And so often when we look at the various revolutions, and I give the history of humans, it's definitely from a European perspective. Why? They're the ones who wrote down a lot of this stuff. They're the ones who essentially wrote the books throughout the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s that we've now read, and over time we've kind of seen the world through this perspective. But there's multiple perspectives. For example, the Native Americans. They obviously were here before the Europeans. Well, they have a perspective of where, why here. And those stories are just now, for the most part, being told in large numbers and by historical geographers. So think about historical geography. We're going to look at the entire history of the world, but we're also going to see, kind of put that in perspective when we look at globalization and these shifts today. Further, I'm going to also add in a little bit of local context. And so when we look at these changes that have happened globally, these revolutions, well, what's happening in Indiana at the time?